Greetings and salutations. I'm your host, Jean-Baptiste. What is ICF? Well, ICF stands for Insulating Concrete Forms. It's basically awesome adult Legos. I am hoping after this presentation you will reconsider your building materials on your next project, or at least your home. To the right is my associate who will assist you with answering the quiz questions attached. So the I in ICF are just foam insulation sheets designed to interlock like Lego blocks, but they have a more intricate connection system than only a few pegs. If you look closely, you can see all the tiny little interlocking teeth along the top of the form. The black plastic bracing or furring strips are what keep the relative shape of the wall. You're not going to want to rely on these when you pour concrete, and I'll explain why later. You would set the blocks down on your foundation, then assemble them as you see fit, placing your rebar into the cavities of the wall and then pour your concrete inside the wall and using a vibrator to have it settle into all the voids. I've been told that your curing time for the concrete can be shorter with ICF, but if you're building multiple stories, I would not risk it. Don't be afraid to cut into the foam either in order to allow your plumbing, electrical, or HVAC vents. As the picture shows, it's a lot easier to throw around foam blocks than it is aluminum panels covered in old concrete or 2x4s. Since most of the framing will only be on the interior walls, your build time and labor costs will be affected greatly. One thing to remember during the setup step is that you will have to build bracing for the walls to stop the concrete from blowing out the seams due to the weight. Don't expect those little plastic furring strips to hold that much weight. I built a home out of ICF a few years ago, and a trick we learned was to cut holes in the bottom of the window frames to properly get concrete into the voids, especially if you have a very large windows. One thing that is helpful is that the windows can usually run around $3,000 to $10,000. One way to reduce the cost is purchase windows that someone returned or couldn't pay for. They are usually custom windows and very expensive, but since the custom order was never fulfilled, they usually are sold at a discount price. You can then change your window openings to accommodate the new sizes. After you complete the ICF walls, you can still add on the exterior finish. Even heavy materials such as stone veneer siding are easily supported. The building we built with ICF used concrete veneer that was shaped and textured to look exactly like a log cabin, with none of the maintenance requirements. An added benefit that makes ICF the main choice of government and law enforcement is that your walls are basically bulletproof, up to a certain caliber. Not much stops at 50 caliber round. You'll also notice that long-term savings on your energy. Having such a high R value, it usually is very easy to cool. So wrapping concrete with insulation foam has some very interesting benefits on the quality of life you will have inside your home. The R value, for one, can get very high with an 8-inch thick walls, having a range of up to R71. You also notice that building this way greatly reduces external noise pollution. As you can see with pictures, you're not going to have the high energy demands due to temperatures of the day and cooling at night. This is important because power companies sell energy at different costs for different parts of the day depending on the demand on the power grid. So during peak power consumption hours, you will not be charged as much. This is also why it's smart to buy a Tesla Powerwall. The way the Powerwall works is it'll take power that you from the power grid at non-peak times, and that way you only get charged at a lower kilowatt or wattage. And when high peak times happen, it doesn't pull from the system, so you're not being charged at that higher rate. It also helps too if you go off the grid, say to a storm or problems, you can rely on your power wall to provide the extra energy. The most efficient way or helpful way, and a way I plan on building my home eventually, is to have a solar array in conjunction with the wall with a converter attached to the power grid so that way I can sell my excess energy back to them. I My brother has a home that does have the converter. There's a lot of hoops you gotta jump through, and sometimes it's not worth it. If you're trying to sell the money back to the grid, you look into it. From what I've seen, it's not really worth it there, but it is worth it when it just gets rid of your overall costs for your power. There are plenty of examples of wildfires, hurricanes, and even drunk drivers failing to destroy ICF homes. When Michael, a Category 5 hurricane, raged through the Panhandle, some of the few homes still standing were built with ICF. There were also homes in the California fires that were still standing even when the other homes right next to them burst into flames. It is interesting also that the foam insulation doesn't actually burn. It merely melts without providing any additional fuel for the fire. Insurance companies prefer ICF and as such are willing to provide greater discounts on insurance. You are going to want to get a pump truck though. And this is a negative because pump trucks are very expensive. You could build scaffolding or bucket concrete up to the top of the wall. I would still suggest just getting the pump truck. It only takes a few concrete pours of running wheelbarrows for you to realize how much you never want to do that ever again. Another problem is plastic furrings sometimes crisscross at different intervals, making it very difficult to get rebar straight down. Your blueprints might have it in a certain location, but there's so many plastic furrings in the way that you might have to shift it over. And depending on where the rebar tying it into the slab is, this could be an issue. The bracing for the ICF is unique and usually requires special kits. You can rent them, and I'd probably suggest doing it unless you are a general contractor and you plan on doing lots of ICF. If you do, then I'd purchase them outright. But some of the kits can get pretty pricey. We try to do our own home built kit out of 2x4s and do it using turnbuckles. It didn't work as well as we thought it would, but we learned a lot from that. I think the next ICF home I build will be a little bit more well put together. One of the biggest problems with ICF is how many contractors are not experienced with working with it at all. This can make it hard to find companies willing to take your build. It should also be noted that ICF doesn't perform as well in cold climates compared to hotter climates. The heat is absorbed and transferred into the footings, not something you really want in the cold. I remember when putting the bracing on the walls that even when we were like very careful, we still had some bulges in the areas. It was our first time assembling it, but we still had issues. My biggest suggestion would be to make sure you put a lot of bracing on it and be very liberal with the placement. Another thing too is I keep calling these Legos and I keep referencing that they're like building blocks, but when you assemble these, don't treat them like Legos. They don't fit together perfectly. You're gonna have things. Your plan of attack on this is probably to be stay at the edges and work your way towards the center, and then cut a piece to fill that center point. This also creates an issue, and the more experience you get with it, the better you'll get. But the issue is it'll create like a small seam there because that cut one piece is custom. I, for one, plan on building my home out of ICF. I know it's not perfect, but if it is a home I plan on spending a long time in or for owning forever, the long-term benefits greatly outweigh the extra costs. Military and federal contracts, and maybe even some civil contracts, like for police stations or fire departments, are more likely going to run ICF. So it's probably going to be something that most people will see in their career, depending on where they're working. But especially with all of us down here in the Panhandle, it just seems dumb to keep building these houses out of stick just to watch them get torn down every couple of years. And block's good and all, but block's not very attractive, and it still can get destroyed by hurricanes. So I think ICF's one of those things where if more builders down here start using it and getting familiarized with it, it'll be more frequently used more by the general populace, and that will probably reduce more of the costs and allow for more insurance agencies to actually start insuring homes down here. So then it would probably reduce everybody's costs in general. So just trying to help everybody understand what it is and maybe get them to use it a little bit more. But thank you all for your time. This concludes my presentation. Please see the attached Word document and have a great day. Thank you.